Thank you for joining us today. We are all processing a lot of things that are going on right now, but really excited to introduce you to our new leadership at the America is All In Coalition. We have some exciting new voices to welcome, and I'm happy to have them here today. This webinar is going to be recorded and available at America's All In and our YouTube page. We will not be recording the Q&A portion, and so we are going to have that portion at the end of this webinar. You can enter questions throughout using the Zoom Q&A function. My name is Elizabeth Lean. I'm the Program Director for the America's All In Coalition, overseeing the Secretariat, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Let me now pass it to our Managing Co-Chair, Gina McCarthy, former U.S. EPA Administrator and the first White House National Climate Advisor. Thank you for getting us started, Gina.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and hi, everybody. It's great to be with all of you today. You know, there is a lot happening in our world right now, including a plethora of confusing and dangerous announcements by the federal government, as it seems to try to manipulate the market to the benefit of fossil fuels. But I want you to know that I'm confident that our coalition will work tirelessly to ensure that clean, homegrown energy thrives and our communities receive the kind of funding investments that they need to lower energy costs, to protect our jobs, and to stop air and water pollution so our kids can have that fighting chance they need to stay healthy now and have a brighter future tomorrow. So let me start with a helpful reminder of the collective power of this movement, which was born when the first Trump administration pulled out of the Paris Agreement in 2017. And since then, we've advanced climate actions that have built stronger economies all across the US, and our coalition now represents nearly 2/3 of the US population and 3/4 of the US GDP. So look, with that kind of reach, and with all the power we can harness from actions underway in our cities, our states, sectors, and beyond, we are more prepared than ever to keep our transition to clean energy moving forward. While the federal government has made a dramatic shift away from prioritizing climate and clean energy, our coalition continues to grow bigger and more bipartisan, and it's better organized than ever before. In short, America is all in, is ready to lead by strengthening all of our societal actions and coordinating, moving forward by defending the progress that we've already made, and by reassuring the international community that people all across our nation are not walking away. We are actually marching forward. Look, I won't claim that any of this work is easy or will be easy. Climate action has never been for the faint of heart, but we have a whole lot we can do and must do together. So let's stay focused on our values, investing in American revival, strength, and optimism. Let's not forget to showcase the progress that we have made on clean energy and resilience. People need to know and see that day in and day out, state and local leaders and businesses are delivering for them by lowering energy bills and building energy independence through clean, cost-effective, locally homegrown energy. You know, the kind of energy that protects our health and our safety, that cuts pollution, saves families money, and unlocks economic growth so we can deliver so many good new paying jobs. In the past 2 years, federal and private sector investments have created over 400,000 new clean energy jobs that are now critical to advancing local economies. States and cities backed by their community have been given significant authority as well as resources so they can move forward with a range of solutions that will help fill the void left by the federal government. So folks, all is not lost. In fact, we need to just keep getting started, and leaders have to step up big time again. I am proud to say that Mike Bloomberg got the ball rolling right out of the gate by demonstrating what real leadership looked like. Mike served as the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Climate Ambition and Solutions. And once again, when this administration withdrew our country from the Paris Agreement, Mike Bloomberg jumped in as he did in 2017 to cover the federal funding gap to the United Nations. That pledge ensured that the United States would not abandon its international commitments. It allowed us to continue to have a say in how trillions of dollars in financial investments in policies and decisions would be made so that we could shape the course of our economy and our ability to fight climate. Mike Bloomberg made sure that we did not walk away from our country's obligation to protect Americans from the disasters that threaten our security, our health, our lives, and our livelihood. So that's why I am thrilled to be a managing co-chair of America is All In. And now I am equally excited to introduce you to our new and rising leadership, our new co-chairs, Governor Pritzker and Mayor Bibb. They are two great leaders who are ready, willing, and able to meet this moment in time. Leaders I am excited to work with to help showcase the incredible momentum that All In will be delivering across America and beyond. So let me start with Mayor Justin Bibb, my buddy, who is the 58th mayor of the city of Cleveland, where he's leading transformative change to modernize city services and uplift communities. Mayor, you are nothing but a rock star. I've worked at every level of a government, and I can tell you that it's cities like Cleveland that are leading the way. I had a good fortune of being in Cleveland not too long ago, and it's the first city in Ohio to commit with 100% renewables by 2050. And Mayor Bibb is delivering on that promise by driving solar expansion, especially in low-income communities. He's bringing electric vehicles and chargers to his city, cutting pollution, and so much more to help that city and our nation's climate goals be achieved. As you can tell, I'm thrilled to welcome him as a new co-chair, Mayor Bibb. Thanks for your leadership and welcome. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Gina, for the opportunity to serve with this amazing coalition at America's All In. I'm honored to be a part of this fantastic group, and I'm honored to serve with my fellow brother in the Midwest in Illinois, Governor Pritzker. Look, as Gina mentioned, now more than ever, states and cities are going to have to lead the way to make sure our country continues to advance climate action. And as we were in 2017, America's mayors stand ready to fight, protect, and defend these investments to make sure we continue to meet the moment. And for me, as the mayor of the great city of Cleveland, this is about equity, ensuring that Black and Brown residents all across our community can see a decrease in their energy costs. It's about protecting the air quality that we're seeing in our city. And it's also making sure that we as a city prioritize clean air, safe and reliable transit, and safer streets for all of our residents. And as Gina mentioned, Cleveland is the first city in Ohio to commit to net zero emissions by 2050. So despite what we may see right now in the White House, Cleveland and other cities across the country are committed to making sure that this nation meets its Paris Agreement goals. I also want to say this. We were so lucky over the last 4 years to have an administration in DC who put their money where their mouth is. And that money and those investments are on the line right now. And so this coalition is going to fight to ensure we double down on those investments, we protect those investments, and make sure we see those projects across the finish line. I also want to say this, as we contemplate where the climate movement goes in this moment, this is not just also about addressing climate change and ensuring that we meet our net zero emissions goals and standards and abide by the Paris Climate Agreement. It's also about energy security. It's also about national security. And it's also about making sure that America, we don't cede our influence to Europe or Russia or China when it comes to our economic competitiveness. And we, as leaders at the state and local level, must make that case as well to convince all those in this country about the importance of these investments. Before I close, I want to just share this. I was at a retreat last week in Washington, D.C., with a group of leaders from across the country trying to figure out where we go next in this work. And I met an 11-year-old climate activist. Her name was Kennedy. And she came to me as mayor asking me what I was going to do to make sure I protect our climate given the president's recent actions. Well, Kennedy is counting on all of us on this call, and she's counting on state and local leaders to get this moment right. And we can't let Kennedy down, and we can't let our cities and states down. And I believe that this coalition has all the resources and the political will to meet the moment. And I'm looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and getting to work over the next year. Back to you, Gina.
Bibb, thank you. It's so great to have you on board in this way. You're an incredible leader. So now let me briefly introduce our other amazing new co-chair, Governor J.B. Pritzker from the great state of Illinois. Governor Pritzker has cemented Illinois as a clean energy leader, attracting new investments in EV manufacturing sector and expanding wind and solar and doubling Illinois' investments in renewables. Governor wasn't able to be with us today, but we have a short video that we're going to share with you from Governor Pritzker.
Hello, everyone. This is Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Illinois has been leading the way in the Midwest on bold climate action, and today I'm proud to take that commitment even further. I'm excited to announce that I'm joining as a co-chair of America is All In to keep pushing for a cleaner, healthier, and more prosperous future. We know that we can't wait for the White House when it comes to real climate leadership. Across the country, states, cities, businesses, and communities are stepping up because the stakes are too high not to. America is All In members are delivering real benefits: clean air and water, resilience against dangerous climate-fueled disasters, and affordable, reliable clean energy. Not to mention, climate action is a massive economic opportunity. It's helping create hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs and boosting American manufacturing. If the U.S. is a global leader in the clean energy economy, we all win. And that's why I'm all in. Let's get to work.
All right. This is really exciting. We are indeed really, really thrilled to have Mayor Bibb and Governor Pritzker step up at this critical time. And All In is really going to benefit so much from your leadership and expertise. I would now like to move to the part of the agenda where we want to focus a little bit more on where we are headed as a coalition. As many of you know, the Biden-Harris administration released the 2035 Nationally Determined Contribution, which is basically a commitment to climate action and a plan, a blueprint that shows what the economy can achieve from a climate perspective. That was released in December. Quickly thereafter, President Trump issued an executive order taking the United States out of the Paris Agreement. Regardless, the 2035 Nationally Determined Contribution, or economy-wide target, will remain our North Star as we respond to the climate crisis with actions and investments that our communities and the science demand. I would now like to introduce Nate Hultman, who can speak to these issues with deep and practical experience, outlining what we can achieve on climate at the subnational level. Nate is the director of the Center for Global Sustainability at the University of Maryland, and from last summer until January 20th of this year, Nate served as a distinguished senior advisor. for climate ambition in the Biden administration. In that role, Nate worked on the U.S. nationally determined contribution. Nate, over to you.
So thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction, and thank you, Gina, Mayor Bibb, and Governor Pritzker for your leadership. It's really a great pleasure to be speaking with all of you today, and thank you all for being here and stepping up. When I was recently at the State Department, I helped work on our latest U.S. national climate target, as Elizabeth mentioned, which I'll speak to in a moment, as well as engaging deeply with a number of other major economies on how they are thinking about their goals. And across the world, it's absolutely clear in every country that action across all of society, including from you all, is going to be essential for reaching our climate goals and doing so in a way that provides benefits that are broadly shared and that turbocharge our respective economies. And I think it's this country that showed how to do this before, and it's our country that is going to set the example again. I can also say with confidence that it's absolutely clear that our work together, all of you participating today, along with the many other leaders in this country's states, cities, businesses, and other groups, can deliver continued ambitious climate action. All of society action from non-federal actors made an extraordinary difference in getting the U.S. on track during previous periods of federal headwinds. Moreover, I also know that the understanding of the power of this work, the contributions of states, cities, businesses, and others, was central and critical in helping set our country's recent target for 2035. And I'm excited to share with you some of our analysis that shows pathways to continued high ambition in the US that can help us keep on track toward our 2035 target and our long-term 2050 net zero goals. So with that, let's go to the first slide. And I'm going to note, if you could flip, okay, thank you. As we go to the first slide, you can see there, what I'm going to note is that we've got over the years have built up, as you heard with Gina McCarthy's intro at the very beginning, have built up a joint process by which we understand, we model, and we get input on possibilities from the broader group, such as yourselves, about what the U.S. can do in diverse areas in states, cities, and through other action areas such as through businesses and investment and through other organizations. And what we've done, we don't have to go through all the details of this slide, but this is just to show you that we've built this over the many years working with America's All In and the entities that preceded America's All In before we generated that. So the idea is that we develop an idea of policy opportunities, working closely with All In, with other stakeholders across the community. And we want to thank America's All In for all the work they've done over the past couple of years to build that out and to work with us to help do that analysis. We then do a lot of detailed modeling of specific actions, both at the federal and at the non-federal or state and city levels. That helps us understand how different states respond differently and what they might do. And it also gives us a roadmap for how high ambition we can be in this country. We do document and publish all of this research. For those of you who are interested in that kind of thing, we certainly invite you to look at those materials or to engage with us. We're always happy to speak to that or share. But the point there is that we want to make this science-based. We want to make this transparent. We want to make it published so that others can look at it and ideally engage and learn as well. Okay, let's flip to the next slide. Okay, so now we'll get, that's just a little bit of background on what we do. But the upshot here is Elizabeth mentioned in her remarks just a minute ago, we now have in the United States a target for 2035. And yes, the Trump administration pulled out of Paris. There's a whole other conversation we could have around that. But the point for us today is that that goal remains. That is a goal that we can continue to aim for, we can continue to work toward achieving, and it is an achievable, although high ambition, goal. And so what we're presenting here today is a bit more detail on how that goal might be reached. Yes, it is true that there might be, in fact, will likely be, already are federal rollbacks of various kinds, attacks on different types of regulatory actions, potentially even rollbacks of different legislative outcomes. We understand that's all kind of in process. The analysis we're presenting actually recognizes and in fact models some of those rollbacks in a way that gives us a potential range. And that's that kind of actions that are taken at the federal government that we know are going to happen, but that can also be countered by significant and substantial actions of the kind we have seen in the past from subnational actors such as states, cities, and businesses. Particularly the subnational governments, as we've heard today, are going to be critical to reach our U.S. climate goals, as well as achieve all those other outcomes we heard the previous speakers talk about. The updated NDC goal, I want to kind of underscore, was a goal that was created with the understanding that there might be rollbacks, and frankly would be rollbacks. It is a goal that is predicated on enhanced subnational action. It is a goal that it recognizes, as subnational actors have shown in previous rounds, that they can step up and they are going to step up as we look to the future. And the goal that was set by the previous administration, by the Biden administration, actually embraces the subnational action as a core part of how we think we can get to that goal. Next slide. Okay, so this is the main point here. As you can see on the kind of solid line starting in the left and going to where it all kind of spreads out, that's kind of our historical emissions in this country. And what you can see is there's some good news there, right? We've already started reducing our emissions. There's been a lot of policies, both at the federal and the subnational levels, that have pushed those emissions reductions forward. Now, yes, we are facing rollbacks. We are facing significant federal headwinds. But what you can see here is that the analysis we showed, and what you can see if you look at the lowermost sort of band going down from the current to the future, you can see that that's the high ambition subnational band. And what that shows is that our analysis showed up to 62% reductions in this country by 2035, predicated on ambitious continued action from states, cities, businesses, and others like all of you. And so that's going to be the formula by which we achieve our ambitious climate goals. And that's also the formula that we can use to stay on track toward our longer term 2050 net zero goal, which also is something that this country can continue to make progress on over coming years. Next slide. Okay, and so this is just a little bit more deep dive. Again, many of you might be in a specific sector or have specific policy questions. This is not the moment to kind of go through all the details with all of you, but basically what you can see is that with enhanced ambition, the right-hand column, enhancing our work on electricity sector through RPS, coal phase outs, and things like RGGI or Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, transport policies to support EVs and clean cars, and Clean Cars 2, adopting Clean Cars 2 standards, for example. In buildings, kind of improving efficiency, that's something that states have a lot of control over and a lot of ability to affect. Zero emission construction standards and procurement and more. In industry, there's CCS targets that are possible. And of course, not to forget non-CO2 gases such as methane. There's opportunities in waste, municipal waste, and waste disposal, as well as additional HFC phase down. Next slide. I just want to note that we can update people in the future as we do this, but we are looking at sort of a more refined set of understanding of how these different subnational policies can be implemented, what exactly the federal rollbacks might look like as we learn more information. And it's important to also note, as we've heard Mayor Bibb, for example, talk about, that there are tremendous benefits that we get from doing this kind of transformation. And we've done some work on this in the past. We're going to keep doing work to kind of help you all understand and also share with others the benefits that we get from doing these kinds of transitions toward a lower carbon, cleaner future that has broadly shared benefits for all. With that, I think we'll flip to the next slide, and I will say thanks very much.
Thank you, Nate. We so appreciate your partnership throughout all of this. I think the University of Maryland team is really grounding all of our work, as Nate mentioned, in the science, which is really, really important. I am now going to go to talking a little bit more about the strategy. If I could have those slides. Perfect. All right. So 2025 is going to be a year of action for America's All In. There is no doubt. We are leaning in. We are moving forward. We are making sure that progress continues. And we will remain a resource for our members, a source of information in a changing policy environment, and a galvanizing force for climate action in the United States. Now, next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. Um, As Gina mentioned, there are lots of different ways that we are going to address these issues. The work is really going to center around three pillars. The first really centers around protecting federal law and policies that support climate investments in communities in a way that support our climate goals and uplift those goals. This will continue and include telling your stories about how the Inflation Reduction Act is creating jobs and economic opportunity in your cities and towns. We want you to continue sharing those stories with us so that we can share them with others, and that those are opportunities that we're going to continue to provide. The second pillar is really to build on the amazing progress that we are seeing every day in states, cities, businesses, healthcare centers, and on tribal lands and across the country. We want to share models of what is working across our coalition so that communities elsewhere can learn from each other. We know that progress is often made by bringing in different groups with differing experience, and that's where we shine. Our network includes groups from such a diverse array of sectors, and we can support that level of coordination that really moves the ball forward. Our third pillar focuses on international engagement. The United States is a strong player on climate action globally, and if the United States federal government doesn't choose to lead on climate, the subnational leaders will step up. We know this, we've seen it before, we'll do it again. We know that there's a lot to celebrate when it comes to making progress on our domestic climate goals, and we intend to share those stories and highlight progress to the international community at the upcoming UN Climate Conference of Parties in Brazil later this year and throughout bilateral engagement. Next slide, please. We are just sharing at a very high level sort of what to expect for the year. We intend to engage partners across the United States, host informative webinars, promote a showcase of subnational climate action at New York Climate Week and at COP30 in Brazil. We hope that you will join us in person or online throughout the year. We really have a number of ways to get involved beyond events, including social media campaigns, opportunities to share your stories with us, and chances to engage members of Congress. In the spirit of providing you the support that you need during uncertain times now, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce a partner who we have really come to rely on, who is able to make some sense of the flood of executive orders and policy shifts so we stay better informed. I'd like to introduce Amy Turner from the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia University to talk through some of the most important decisions coming from the Trump administration impacting federal policy, grants, and other programs on climate that many of you are feeling right now. I'm also going to share a helpful two-pager in the chat here that came from a call for local governments last week on proposed federal funding freezes. This can be useful for any organization accessing federal funding. It lays out steps for taking inventory of funding at issue, building relationships with agency representatives, and the information to gather in making case for maintaining funding commitments. After Amy's presentation, we will have a block of time to get to Q&A. But before we get there, over to you, Amy.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you to Mayor Bibb, Governor Pritzker, to Gina and Nate. It's really an honor to be a part of this call. So much of the last couple of weeks has been chaotic, and it is really, really wonderful to sit in community with you all as we sort of figure out this new landscape. So, I am going to do my best to try and give, a lay of the land, a sort of what has happened over the last 2 weeks, distilled to what is, most useful and actionable at the subnational level. If there's anything you take away from this, in addition to a nugget or two of information, I hope that it is that you understand how many folks are out there watching this space and hoping to guide you through it. America is All In is such a wonderful coalition of groups that can, send resources your way to really help you navigate this uncertain time. We can go to the first slide, please. Day one of the new administration, President Trump signed about 26 executive orders, several of which touched on climate and clean energy, as well as on environmental justice and on diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of the areas that we care very much about. the executive orders did things like put a pause on certain kinds of federal funding, particularly IRA and bipartisan infrastructure law funding, rescinded a whole slew of Biden-era executive orders, withdrew from the Paris Agreement, as we talked about, and did a whole range of other things with respect to climate and clean energy. It was really sort of a shock and awe campaign, just the amount that came out on day one in these executive orders. If you can go to the next slide, please. I think one of the major headlines over the, starting on January 20th, but also over the last several weeks, has been around the pause on federal funding that has occurred at many of the agencies. So this originated in Section 7 of one of the Inauguration Day executive orders, the Unleashing American Energy Executive Order. And the words of it can say what it means better than I can. It immediately paused the disbursement of funds appropriated through the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law, including but not limited to a couple of named programs that relate to electric vehicle charging, but really broad language and quite confusing, ambiguous language. These were innocent early days when some of us thought that maybe this funding pause only applied to non-obligated dollars. Just really unclear what this was meant to mean. But if we can go to the next slide, we found out a week later that any sort of thoughts that we had that this might be a sort of limited pause on funds were really put to rest when the Office of Management and Budget put out a memo essentially putting a pause on all local federal climate spending, or all of the climate related spending in the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law, among many other policy priorities. Of course, climate and clean energy were only one of the things on the table here. Next slide, please. The following day, we saw lawsuits by states and nonprofit groups, as well as business associations. Next slide, please. And the day after that, the OMB rescinded that January 27th memo, putting a pause on all federal funding. Next slide, please. But as we know, they didn't really mean it. So they rescinded that January 27th memo, but we had the White House press secretary standing in the press room and posting on Twitter or X, that they rescinded the memo basically because it caused a bunch of confusion and caused some people to sue, but they didn't really mean to rescind the underlying executive order. The funding freeze was still very much meant to be in effect. The White House was insisting that funds could still be frozen under the Unleashing American Energy EO. And there were widespread reports of federal grantees across a whole range of programs either not receiving funding draws as they were entitled to, or being shut out of their payment portals entirely. So none of this really did a whole lot to allay confusion or make anyone feel a whole lot better. And that has really continued to be the case. If you can go to the next slide, there are a couple of lawsuits ongoing around the funding freeze. There was one brought by a group of nonprofits, as well as public health organizations and business groups. And we have a temporary restraining order in effect in that litigation, basically directing the federal agencies not to give effect to that January 27th memo. Of course, that January 27th memo has been rescinded. And there was another lawsuit in which 22 states plus the District of Columbia filed suit against the administration. And there's also a temporary restraining order in that case, blocking federal agencies from pausing, freezing, impeding, blocking, canceling, or terminating compliance with their awards to the states that had sued. All of this, I think, if we can just go to the next slide, still a lot of confusion here. We do have some relief from this funding freeze, but this will, I hope, continue to be clarified in the coming weeks. These temporary restraining orders, are ambiguous at times. They don't necessarily capture all of the grantees we would like them to capture. They don't necessarily capture the underlying executive orders, or maybe they do. Different legal minds can read them in different ways. There's still quite a bit of confusion around whether aspects of the funding freeze are in place. And, we will have hearings in the coming weeks in both of these cases that hopefully offer more clarity. The judges in both of these cases, if they wish to, could put preliminary injunctions in place that offer longer term relief from the funding freeze while the litigation unfolds. And hopefully in doing so, they could offer some clarity in the language to make it clear the wide range of grantees and programs that we hope the restrictions on the funding freeze apply to. I think maybe more to the point, what's happening on the ground is somewhat different than what maybe we're, hearing courts decree, right? So, the experience on the ground has been that a wide range of federal agencies have in recent days and continue to not receive payments when they request them, when they are entitled to them, or to be shut out from their payment portals, or perhaps cut off from their project officers entirely within the agencies. So, we are hopeful that some of this, some of the funds will start flowing again soon, but it's really going to be agency by agency, grantee by grantee. And this is really a space to watch closely as the litigation unfolds and as the situation on the ground it plays out. Next slide, please. I'll switch gears a little bit to talk about just some of the other things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. The Inauguration Day executive orders, as well as some of the other guidance that has come out from the administration in the last 2 weeks, have really sought to tear down environmental justice policy at the federal level. So EJ policy in the US, at least within the federal level of government, is largely set through executive order. Aspects of environmental justice have, of course, made their way into laws like the Inflation Reduction Act, but federal policy with respect to EJ is largely set in an executive order, and those can very easily be rolled back by subsequent administrations. So a couple of the major things that have happened here, one is that the Justice 40 commitment has gone away. Justice 40, of course, was that pledge that 40% of certain climate and clean energy spending would be made in or to the benefit of disadvantaged communities. That was set purely by executive order. That has gone away. The Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool is a tool established by the White House Council on Environmental Quality to help federal agencies and other stakeholders identify disadvantaged communities. That tool has also gone away. It has been taken down from federal websites. It is hosted privately for those who'd like to access the data. But in terms of it being any part of federal policy, that has gone away because it was set out only in executive order. The day after Inauguration Day, the Office of Personnel Management also directed agencies to place DEI and environmental justice staff on administrative leave, and that has been widely reported to have been taking place throughout the agencies. So, I say this because it certainly impacts federal EJ policy, but it's also going to make it much more difficult for subnational actors to get the support they need on EJ questions, on DEI questions, on how to cite projects or have projects that benefit disadvantaged communities. That's all going to become a lot more difficult because of the drain in capacity that is happening in the federal agencies on environmental justice and DEI. Next slide, please. There's also been quite a bit of talk about an EV mandate. I want to be very clear, there is no electric vehicle mandate at the federal level. So reading between the lines, what are we talking about here? We can expect that the administration will try to roll back greenhouse gas standards for vehicles. Those were standards that were finalized last year to reduce pollution from vehicle tailpipes. We can expect rollbacks of NHTSA's corporate fuel economy standards for vehicles. We can expect the administration to go after the state of California's waiver for its Advanced Clean Cars rule, Advanced Clean Cars 2. This is a rule that would effectively require that new vehicles sold in the state of California be electric in 2035. There were big fights over various California waivers during the first Trump administration, and we expect that will be the case again. The administration will try to rescind that waiver, and significant litigation will ensue. One thing that's new here in the executive orders is that the EPA has been directed to go back and take a look at the 2009 endangerment finding, which is the legal basis on which vehicle greenhouse gas pollution is regulated in this country. This is something that, you know, the Trump administration the first time around reportedly considered, but never actually acted on. And, you know, in this executive order, EPA has been told to go back and take a look at it. So that is something that could be on the table this time around as well. Kind of goes without saying, there are a lot of legal questions about the administration's ability to do all of this, but I say this to sort of point out what might be coming down the pike. Next slide, please. If there is a tiny bit of good news in all of this, is that tax credits have, you know, largely been spared during this spate of executive orders and you know, further executive guidance, largely because the executive can't do a whole lot on tax credits by himself. Tax credits are in the tax code, they are law, and in order for them to go away, Congress would have to act. And that includes elective pay, that mechanism by which non-taxable entities like states, local governments, and nonprofits can claim tax credits via cash. Of course, we expect that Congress will be negotiating a tax bill in 2025, and the tax credits and elective pay would be on the table. So this is a really good opportunity to tell your electeds that you like these tax credits, that you are using them, that you are bringing dollars into their district, particularly through elective pay. This is a space where you can have real impact right now. Next slide, please. You know, another thing these executive orders did was to identify a whole bunch of environmental rules that could be weakened to make fossil fuel project siting much easier. And so I won't go into the details here, but just we could see, you know, more attempts to cite fossil fuel projects in our communities, and that could require real resources on many of our parts to push back on that. Next slide, please. We've already heard a ton about this, so I won't belabor the point. I think Nate made the point better than I did. But you know, I can do a little bit of math here. The next time we owe an NDC will be after President Trump has left office. So there is really significant opportunity for subnational actors to stay the course, as Nate described, sufficient that a new administration could come in 2029 and submit an NDC that is, you know, and set policy rather that is consistent with the NDC that we all are doing our best to keep track with. Next slide, please. So just to tie this all up, you know, why do subnationals matter here? And I think we've heard a ton about this already, but, you know, y'all are critical to advancing the Paris Agreement targets, you know, really working across sectors. You all have really important operational climate work that you can continue to implement. You all also play super important leadership roles within your communities and within your sectors. And that is all the more important now than it was a couple of months ago. And we can really rely on continued support from networks like America is All In to get us the resources we need to understand the lay of the land, to understand what can and cannot be done, and to hopefully give us all, you know, a little bit of hope in this time that there are ways forward. So I will stop there. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Amy. We definitely need to lean in and lead and really show progress here. I have so many questions that I can pull from. I'm going to actually see if I can ask Mayor Bibb, who is